Welcome, Bill. You've done 3 reports. This is your 3rd one. And I have to say, this is, as ever, 2 or 3 key things in it that we find really, really exciting. One is it's data rich. We keep using your data from your reports. It's powerful stuff. You get it from sources and using processes that most of us can't get to. So that's great. I love the data rich role of it. It's also, this one particularly, full of case studies. For those who want to see what the future might look like, have a look at some of these case studies, because some really, really interesting stuff going on there. I think the other thing, the 3rd thing about it that struck me was that it's slightly more socially and culturally engaged this time than the previous 2. There's a real lot of stuff in about issues around leadership and the role of it within inside communities. And again, I think I found that very powerful too. So what we're going to do is ask Bill just to talk about the report. He's been involved with it in maybe 20 minutes, something of that order. And then at the end of his chat, we will then take questions. So if you want to stack up your questions while he's talking, that's fine. And then I'll try and sieve them out as we get to the end. So Bill, welcome.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do this morning. COVID-19 is going to be blamed for many things as time goes by, but one thing's for certain, it has accelerated the demise of our town centres and high streets as shopping destinations and paved the way for a post-retail landscape to emerge. Now, we've been banging on about this since the first review in 2013, which highlighted the fact that we have too much retail space in the country. We are changing from a car-borne culture of the second half of the last century, where cars became our way of life, to a new technology-based culture based on the mobile intelligence and facilities that it brings with it. And as we go into this century, we will eventually, I think, see the demise of the car and its importance and the emergence of society in a very different way. And what we found when we went into this 3rd report is that there is a mood out there, and particularly amongst the younger people in this country, that, and the world, I suspect, that says, you know, we do value different things. We recognise the planet is being killed by carbon. We recognise that we need to act differently, and we want you to take the lead and to do that. And in order to do that, there are 3 things that we're calling for, which is localism on steroids, if you like. And we are appealing to central government to stop trying to say you can influence these towns, that you have the silver bullet, because you don't. So get out, butt out, and create conditions where local authorities, local communities can focus on their own towns and to remove the barriers to progress that they encounter and enable them and empower them to redesign their own high streets and have a say on the businesses and services and amenities that occupy it, and to engage with communities in a very different way, increase CPO powers if necessary, to drum out absent landlords and investment managers that only see your empty unit as a number on their spreadsheet, and as long as their bottom right hand number is a return, they do not care. So let's get rid of that and focus on localism and local leadership. And in order to achieve that, we need local leaders that are valued and recognised in the same way as powerful mayors across other countries are actually recognised. And we should have candidates for those leadership roles to be selected from a broad range of dynamic and collaborative skills in order to get the best out of their communities. And I'm delighted to say there's a chapter in this review that is written by Neil Schneider, who is the ex-chief executive of Stockton-on-Tees. And by the way, Stockton-on-Tees is featured in the 2018 review as an example of change that has taken place. I mean, they have done remarkable things in Stockton. It's just amazing that the vision that they've had about the future, and it's not just based on retail, and they've done a great job. So Neil's section is worth looking at, and what he basically says is that we've got to shape up in our local leadership, particularly in the officers, and that the nepotism that has perhaps prevailed over the years, where people through longevity have made their way to the top, you know, this is not necessarily the grounding that is required for a dynamic leader that is commercially orientated and is going to help shape the product called the town, working with the people that live and work and play in it. So leadership is key. And then the final thing is, the final message is fewer cars, more green space. Let's dump the conversation on car park costs, for God's sake. It is such a distraction. You need to plan for your towns not to have any cars at all. And what wonderful opportunity you've got today to experiment with pedestrianisation in your towns and to create space for things to happen than COVID because of social distancing. I mean, I walked down my local high street on a Saturday, which is traditionally the market day, and the markets are still just opening up, and they've still got the high street open. They've still got cars travelling through it, and buses and taxis, and the pavements are narrow and the stalls are out. There's no social distancing. You know, close the damn thing down. I mean, it's an opportunity to experiment with wider space, better experiences. People will forgive you for it because you can, and then you might learn something from it. So the strategy around COVID, and it's a bit after the horse has bolted, I appreciate, but the strategy around COVID and how you manage the place during this time is vital. And you could be experimenting with lots of things, because fewer streets are what the future is about. You're going to have to de-street your towns and concentrate your goods and services into different areas. You're going to have to get a huge expansion of pocket parks, green spaces, town squares where you can do experiences. And you're not going to design your towns around the car, because it's going to disappear. By the second half of this century, probably people won't bother to own cars. Car hiring. You know, like you call up an Uber today, you'll be able to call up a driverless thing that takes you places. You'll have mobility hubs inside town centres. You know, you'll have electric scooters. You'll have all sorts of things. You've got to start thinking about that now. So what we basically said in this whole review is that the model that is going to be exciting for the future and needs to be developed and implemented by inspired local leaders will see a massive shift of power away from central government to local communities and give everyone a stake in their towns. It puts sustainability and the environment at the heart of everything, because don't forget, climate change is still out there, hasn't gone away, and David Attenborough is ready to start again, and that wonderful young Swedish girl, she'll keep stuff going. And my granddaughters will look at dinosaurs like me and accuse us of all sorts of things as baby boomer population, but we've got to start to recognise it's a very serious issue, and we've got to base everything on a quality of life and experiences, and not the blind mass consumerism that we based it on in the past. And when you look at what's happening in the startup again, you know, Boris saying hit the high street, you know, people queuing for miles for Primark, miles for IKEA, tells you that they're doing that because there isn't the alternative. So buying a t-shirt from Primark that does exploit labour around the world, Bangladesh and all the things that go through it, that does create carbon that is huge, and the fast fashion creates more carbon emissions than the whole of the airline industry in a year. We've got to recognise that they will still do that if there's no alternative. So the new world will be around local enterprise that will grow up around this thing and recognises and rewards great local leadership accordingly. We've got to devolve power to local authorities, remove the constraints, allow local communities to develop their places. And the key here is you've got to compete for people to come and live, work, play and visit your place. So heritage is most important, and that was in the 2 previous reviews. We've also called for a removal of old taxation. Well, we've got a business rates holiday until March. Well, what better opportunity to dump the damn thing and replace it with something more simple? I call for a sales tax. But, they're better minds than me out there, but get rid of it. It's a monolithic minefield of consultants and appealant judges and all sorts of stuff. Just dump the damn thing and get rid of it.
We focus on business rates enormously, rightly so. Why do you think we never focus on the fact that residential council tax has not been revalued since 1991? None of us are paying a sufficient amount to mirror the property values that we have all accumulated. Now, I know that's a political problem, but isn't that a useful lever we should be making far more of to increase this amount of money coming into our local authorities?
Well, I agree with what you just said, but I don't return to rates. I think rates need chucking out the window, and I think property taxes are a thing of the past, and they need to be dumped. I mean, what you need to understand, I think, as a community, is what is it you need to contribute in order to have the lifestyle and the goods and services that you need to have an enjoyable life on this planet, and to not drain the planet, but to make the experiences fantastic, bring up your kids and do stuff, and that needs money. So that's a tax. It's a fact. Now, what you call it is a different thing, but to base it on property values is old hat. Isn't going to work. So the reason I say business rates should be dumped, it should be replaced by something that still raises money. So I've advocated a 2% sales tax on retail. Would actually raise exactly the same amount of money because there's 400 billion of retail in this country. 2% raises 8 billion. 8 billion is highly adjacent to what is raised from retail in business rates.
One of the powers of bids, of course, is that we are also elected. We have 5-year ballots. Businesses have to vote for us on what we say we're going to do. Is that model important to our strength, or do you think we should move towards 10-year bids? In America, there are some that are simply permanent and they just become part of the business economy. What's your thoughts on that process of bids being part of the democratic process?
I think the democratic process to raise money to provide goods or service and to promote or whatever it is it does for the people that are funding it is to do it in a democratic way is obviously the right thing to do. I'm just a bit concerned. I mean, for example, with bids, you've just gone through a big process where you're seeing some of your major contributors on a national basis go bust.
Absolutely right.
So that must be sort of the back of your minds and refocus. So all I'm trying to say is that, is your product right? I mean, today, tick the box, it does lots of good things, but is it right for tomorrow, and how do you evolve it? I don't know the answer to that. I just know that I think it's wider than just the businesses. I think it is community orientated, and I do think that it has some links with local authorities, and the election process and democratic process is the right way to do it. I just think it's always healthy for any brand, and you're a brand, bids as a product and a brand, to challenge itself every now and then. Yes. This is a great time to do that challenge, because COVID has woken us all up, hasn't it?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think a lot of bids are already looking at their boundaries, their roles. Some will be moving back to having much smaller boundaries and far less money. Others are looking for a complete revival. There's a real sense, for example, that seaside towns in the UK will become very different, as no one can have holidays abroad anymore. And we shall again do old bucket and spade holidays. So many bids are really rethinking.
Well, that's a very important point you just raised. The reason people are queuing up to go to IKEA, 5 miles of queues, or to Primark after they've been locked up, the reason they're doing that, and the reason they're going to all go to Benidorm and Spain, all right, is because the alternatives aren't here. And that's the brilliance of COVID. There is an opportunity to create stuff that is better than that stuff. So if our seaside towns were more relevant than going to Benidorm, that did have the kind of education, and I'm not just talking about candy floss and beaches, I'm talking about experiences. There's no better opportunity than now to get people to come to them and to make sure your facilities are right.
And one strand running through this, and it's been picked up in one or two of the questions, is that I know you're averse to local authorities buying up stuff, but if we go back to the idea of a few years ago of curating high streets, is there an opportunity here for local authorities to buy up some of this defunct stock and then use it innovatively and creatively to bring in the sort of players that you feel we should have on the high street? Because if they don't do it, no one else is going to do it, are they?
Yeah, I know. I'm not against local authorities buying stuff. I'm against them buying assets to get revenue streams to plug budget shortfalls because of austerity of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That is the wrong reason. Okay, I'm totally pro them buying stuff to repurpose it and to get the mix right and to change use. I'm absolutely spot on. Again, I go back to Stockton-on-Tees. The Fountain Arcade is a wonderful building in the middle of Stockton. It was bought by Neil Schneider's authority, and they turned it into a incubator space for new businesses so that retailers and traders could start up without having to mortgage their house and put their livelihoods on the line. They could experiment. They got 2 years. They had to reach certain standards, and they've migrated 10 businesses over the last 3 or 4 years.
Places like Basingstoke, we know, they bought a lot of duff old government property and turned it into interesting residential. And again, there must be a role there for some of these shopping malls that we know are absolutely rubbish as shopping malls, but would be interesting live-work units and stuff. So is that a sort of strategy which your project thinks would be good?
Sure, absolutely. If they've got to repurpose it around a overall plan for the place, I'm there, 100%.
Yeah. Can I thank you all for coming? It's been good to see so many people here. I think we've had 71 at the peak, 1 or 2 faded away. And Bill, you were as ever a star turn. So thank you very much indeed. And we look forward to joining you again. Look after yourselves, folk. Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye to you.
Bye-bye.